Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to be talking about optimizing display advertising in an omni-channel world. My name is Stephanie White. I'm a Senior Account Manager at Hanapin Marketing. I'm also a PPC Hero blogger. You can reach me at Twitter at Stephanie PPC Pro. I'm also with me, I have Blair Symes. He's the Director of Content Marketing at DialogTech, and you can reach him on Twitter at DialogTech. So who is Hanapin? We run the world's most popular PPC blog, PPC Hero, and conference, HeroConf. In October, we'll be in London for an international HeroConf. You can find more about that at www.heroconf.com. Hanapin Marketing is an industry-leading digital marketing agency that manages and optimizes clients' paid search, paid social, and display programs. Just a little look at who some of our clients are. Hanapin works with big brands and Fortune 500 companies in a variety of verticals. Check out our clients on our hanapinmarketing.com for more information. One fun fact about our clients, our first and second clients are still with us today, 12 years later. And that's because we have a pretty fantastic business model. Also, we just released the State of PPC for 2018. This year, hundreds of search marketing professionals, influencers, and decision makers from brands and digital agencies alike complete our survey. This is an annual report. We take a look under the hood of advertising's fastest growing industry to find the most comprehensive statistical breakdown of the digital ad industry to date. Go to our PPC library on hanapinmarketing.com to download the report today, or you can use the link in the chat box. So Blair, I'll pass this over to you.
Sure, thanks Stephanie, and hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Just a quick word about DialogTech, if you're not familiar with us. We provide actual marketing analytics for phone calls, and some of the world's biggest brands and most successful agencies use us in order to measure the phone calls they generate from their marketing, analyze the conversations, use call analytics to target people with the right ad at the right time, as well as personalize and optimize the caller experience. So we're going to be going into a little bit more data about phone calls later on, but for now I'll pass it back to Stephanie.
Great, thanks Blair. So if you'd like to join in the conversation, you can do it through Twitter using the hashtag ThinkPPC in your tweets, or you can use the webinar question box to send us any questions you have. So our first question we have is, how much experience do you have in display advertising outside of remarketing? So Blair, how much experience do you have in display outside of remarketing?
Well, I mean, we've been doing it here at DialogTech. I mean, I've been here for 5 years, and we've been doing it here forever. Now, I mean, I'm a little older, so I'm in my 40s, and I've been doing display advertising way back before the iPhone. So, you know, it's been a long time, but it's amazing some of the things that you can do with it now to really show the right ad to the right person.
I completely agree. All right, so it looks like we have a pretty wide range. So we have about, 37% of our audience has less than a year experience, so some people that are a little newer to it. Several people, almost half of our audience has 1 to 3 years experience. We have a smaller portion, 12% with 3 to 5 years, and 7% make up 5 years plus. So we have a pretty big mix of people with varying experiences. All right, so our webinar agenda today is we're going to discuss why display is an important marketing channel, why phone calls are important conversions from display, omni-channel audience building and targeting strategies, creative ad, landing pages and optimization tips, data-driven strategies for increasing display ROI. So here's some reasons like why display matters. If you think about it, digital continues to replace traditional advertising. If you think about it, we used to have online display, now is replacing outdoor display billboards. The difference between billboards is it wasn't targeted. You had to pretty much catch anybody and everybody. Online display has improved because you can target people based on age, gender, interests, and then you also have the ability to measure results. So you kind of think the old school where you have the TV, radio, and newspaper kind of targeting anybody and everybody, and now we have display, Gmail, YouTube, plus Google Display is also available on 2 million plus websites. And like I said, with the targeted reach, that's a lot of people that you're able to reach with specific messages for people who are more likely to be interested in your brands. So display has the ability to reach 90% of all global internet users. That is a really big number, and you definitely want to be there. The monthly reach, so first of all, Google Display is the #1 ad network, and they have 219,000 plus unique monthly visitors. So that's a lot of people you have the ability to get before each month. So if you also take into consideration that 82% of shoppers research online before buying, they're going to spend time at Amazon, then other places are part of the display network like YouTube, blogs, and Gmail. So people are looking for information about products before they're ready to buy, and it's a great opportunity to introduce your brand to new customers. YouTube is another fantastic place. It has 182 million unique visitors. People are looking for DIY videos, they're looking for how-to. That is another opportunity to reach people who might like your brand. So don't forget about mobile. So people spend more than 5 hours online per day, and that 40% of the time is with a mobile device. And then 65% of the transactions start on mobile. So if you think about the cross-device tracking and all the people began on mobile and on desktop. Plus, they notice there's an 18% increase in retail e-commerce spending in Q4 2016 compared to the previous year, and we will expect that to continue to grow in 2018 and beyond. So here's some information about audience and targeting. Great resource to build your initial ad groups using analytics data to build your custom ad groups. So display allows you to basically create specific targeted personas. So you can create a unique customer experience and custom messages to people that fit your audience. So you can target people by age, by gender, whether they're a parent, what type of interest they have, whether they're in market. So you have the opportunity to really customize this and create personas that match a likely buyer. So some of the information you can get is in the analytics audience insights, where you can look at people by age, gender, affinity interests, and market interests, and you can even create custom affinity audiences, which is kind of a make-up of keywords or domains that match the audience you're looking to target. It's kind of an example of in-market audience. So for this client, we can see that a significant amount of revenue and transactions are coming from people who are in market for home improvement and use motor vehicles. So those are one way we can kind of start learning on which audiences to start using and building on our initial ad groups. The affinity is more like the movie lovers, kind of more of their interests. So in this one, again, we have a significant amount of transactions coming from people who are movie lovers, although doesn't mean every movie lover is going to buy your product. So you might want to consider overlaying this with keywords that match your product or services that you're selling. Demographics is another one. You can do age and demographics. Like for example, in this client, 93% of all the transactions and revenues coming from males. So we know that when we're doing our display, we don't really want to target females, or not a large percentage, because we know that's not really our buyer. It's also a good idea to import analytics data into AdWords, import bounce rate, pages per session, and average session duration. These are all things that can kind of help you determine if you're reaching the right audience with your groups. So like for example, in some of these audiences, we noticed the bounce rate was between 87 to 90% with 10 seconds on the page. It's just told us this wasn't the right audience, and they weren't really interested or engaging with our ads. Another thing that you can do is you can overlay keywords on top of your interest or affinity groups, kind of as I mentioned before. One thing about it is it does improve your relevance, it does lower the impressions because it does narrow your audience. But we found that there's a lower bounce rate, more pages per session, and a higher conversion rate. But like I said, there's less people in this group, but they're a little bit more targeted. You also want to take advantage of this display exclusion. So like, for instance, you have the site category exclusion. So maybe you don't want your brand associated with sensitive content issues, or you might want to avoid appearing on park domains or in-game where maybe people would accidentally click your ad. And you could exclude mature audiences. After that, you'll just want to monitor your placements to determine if you need to adjust this more. You're also able to add negative keywords to your display campaigns to avoid appearing on places that have keywords that are irrelevant. And also, if you see that you have a lot of traffic coming from mobile apps and no conversions, you can exclude a placement of AdSense for mobileapps.com, and that'll get rid of a lot of those apps that may be driving spend but not driving any sort of relevant traffic. Creative and ad options. So one of the things you want to do is get to the point, make sure you include a call to action. So there's some of the ad copy types that you can do with display: responsive ads, static ads, animated ads, and video ads. So those are some options of what you can build. Responsive ads are great. They're easy to update. They're, you don't have to have a graphic department build them. You can do, headlines and description. Just keep in mind that your headline and description do not always appear together, so just make sure your ad will still make sense if one of those is not in your ad. You also have the ability to click on more options and select a call to action that's relevant to the action you want your customer to take. Here are some of the ad copy, the most common desktop spec sizes. I would recommend that you not only use responsive ads, but use the static ads as well, and even some animated ads. It's a good idea to use all ad specs available so that you have the opportunity to appear in all places possible, and then you can optimize based on performance, determining which ones work best and which ones don't. So here's the most common mobile ad sizes, and I know when mobile ads first came out, there was only one, and now there's 4, so I would recommend that you put all of these ad sizes in your display campaign. Another great idea is to split out your mobile campaign for display from your desktop campaign so you can actually bid on them differently, because there is more mobile traffic and you may want to decrease your bids and spend a little less. Mobile's a little harder to convert on, and sometimes that's a starting point before someone would cross over and complete the conversion on a desktop. Another great option is using the video. You can share your brand that way and kind of, introduce with your, definitely put your brand awareness message in the first 10 seconds of the video. But you only pay when they watch 30 seconds or 100%. So if you have a 15-second long ad, they have to watch 15 seconds before you pay. Or if the user engages with your ad, they click on it, they click the call to action, those are things that you would only pay for that. In-stream also allows users to skip after 5 seconds. You don't pay when they skip. So it's a great way to get your brand awareness out and not pay for people who decide to skip your ad. You also have the ability to measure performance. So here's some Google display stats. So building brand awareness is definitely critical. So this is one client spent $176,000 in search and $358,000 in display. And their direct revenue from this was $1.3 million for search and $1.3 million for display. So we had a lot of revenue that came in from display, which is pretty amazing. Plus, we really believe that display helped improve revenue for search. And assisted revenue, we saw an additional $1.7 million in assisted revenue from search and another $1.8 million of assisted revenue for display. So these are some pretty big numbers for this client who's very active in display. Looking at the multi-channel funnel is a great way to compare, like this date compares 2016 compared to 2015, kind of full year over full year. And you can really see that actually all channels saw a significant boost in performance. So it really did appear to us that our display was not only helping display itself and helping with paid search, but it looked like it was actually improving the performance of all of the channels. You can also take a look at your multi-channel funnel paths to determine how complex your funnel is. Like, do people require a lot of touch points. You can see that people often had to have many different interactions before they chose to make a purchase with this brand. This is especially true if you have higher priced items and people take longer to decide, and you don't want them to forget about you and go to someplace else. So display is kind of a great way to show up for those customers who are likely. And this is just display and not remarketing too. You also for tracking calls, so you can set up call extensions, but only with the search network with display select. So in order to track calls from a display campaign, a display only campaign, you'll want to set up third-party call tracking so that when people land on the website that it tracks the calls. And this client, we do get a lot of phone calls from our display campaign, and the callers are usually inquiring about purchasing a product. They're a little higher up in the funnel. They may require a little bit more nurturing, but they're definitely interested because they were able to see a picture of the product, they get to the website, and they're able to talk to somebody after that. Just tells us that we were hitting a relevant audience who's taking action. This client just recently, we had Google Dynamic Website call tracking, which was great, but it wasn't giving us enough information about the calls. So they just recently activated third-party call tracking, in which this case we were able to see that 15% of our calls were coming from display. So the display calls on average were about 7 to 9 minutes long. So those are pretty good lengthy calls with new customers. So some of the key takeaways, Google Display is the #1 ad network with a 90% reach. Use analytics to build your custom personas. Use the display exclusions to optimize your performance, and test all creative ad formats and measure performance. I'm going to pass this over to Blair to talk to you about why calls matter.
Sure, thanks, Stephanie. That was, a ton of great information. Just a reminder, if people have any questions about some of the material that either Stephanie or I cover later on, please feel free to input that into the chat box, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session during the live Q&A. But since we are talking about omni-channel display optimization, omni-channel strategies, I did want to provide a deeper dive into phone calls and phone call conversions. So many of the strategies that Stephanie just explained work equally well for online conversions, offline conversions like calls and in-store visits. But there are strategies that you can use specifically if you're interested in driving phone calls from display ads. So Stephanie, if you go to the next slide for me. I do want to start by explaining a little bit about why phone calls are a very important conversion from digital marketing and also from display ads in particular. So as Stephanie touched on earlier, you can see some stats about the importance of mobile and how display advertising is now being engaged with, viewed on, and targeted on smartphones and on mobile devices. 70% of U.S. ad spend this year alone is for display ads. 70% of display ads are targeting mobile devices, rather. So it makes sense when somebody sees your mobile ad, your display ad on a smartphone, they click on and click to your landing page. If they're going to convert and contact you, the quickest and easiest way to do that on a smartphone is by using click-to-call and calling that business. So you can see some of the numbers on the right. In the U.S. alone, in 2014, display advertising, mobile display advertising on smartphones generated 22 billion phone calls to U.S. businesses. And this year, it's expected to generate nearly 30 billion phone calls. So people really are calling from your display ads, and those numbers are on the rise as mobile usage and mobile targeting increases. So if you go to the next slide, you can see why more phone calls from your marketing and your display advertising is actually great news for marketers. So phone calls are often the conversion that converts to revenue the most. So if you think about a phone call versus someone who fills out a web form on your site, someone who fills out a form, they might fill out multiple forms. You're still going to have to try to get them on the phone or through email to get them to engage with you, whereas a phone call is a live ad that you can sell to that you can close, that you can upsell to right away. And usually someone who calls is a little, more interested in engaging with you in the purchasing process. So it makes sense that someone who calls would convert at a higher rate than a web lead. And you can see some of the stats that show that phone calls are influencing over $1 trillion in U.S. consumer ad spend. And a recent study by Forrester, the analyst firm, said that people who call a business not only convert faster, but they end up spending more and they have a higher retention rate. So they really are strong leads to generate from your display advertising. But it's not just mobile and smartphones that are the reason why people are calling from display and other digital advertising, but it's also, depending on what industry you work on, people often do want to have a phone conversation. So if you're selling a product or a service that is either complicated or it's expensive or it's something that people don't buy often, it's an infrequent purchase, or it's an urgent purchase, people often want to call and engage with you and convert by calling. So you think about something like an expensive, infrequent purchase like buying a car. People want to call dealerships before they show up to schedule test drives or to ask questions about inventory or get pricing. Insurance, phone calls are a huge part of insurance marketing. Most people do research insurance online, but when it comes to converting, most people will call an agent or their local agent or the contact center to ask questions. And you can see all the others from travel and hospitality to healthcare to people purchasing telecom. If it's expensive, complicated, an infrequent or urgent purchase, people often want to call. So now that you've seen a little bit about why calls are important, Stephanie, go to the next slide. We can start covering some of the tactics if you're interested in how you can optimize your display marketing, your creative, your landing pages, and your ad targeting, specifically around generating phone calls. So Stephanie, if you go to the next slide, I'll show you some examples around the ad creative. So think about where somebody is. If you know where somebody is in the purchasing process when they're seeing your ads, you can start to strategize and do really smart optimizations around the actual creative. So you can see examples to the left. Here's from Acura. You can see if you're not sure where somebody is and you want either web forms or phone calls, you can provide a more generic call to action within your display advertising. But then you can see Acura, if they think, okay, I am someone who's likely to call, perhaps there's someone who's called you in the past, you can actually create specific calls to action in your display ads, asking somebody to engage with you by calling. Gerber Life Insurance on the right, the exact same ad, but a different call to action because they think that somebody who sees the ad on the right is more likely to call. And if they see that call now strong CTA in the ad, it's more likely to generate that phone call conversion. If you go to the next slide, Stephanie. So when somebody clicks through on your display ad, you can also optimize your landing pages and website in order to encourage that phone call conversion. So on the example on the left, you can see a display ad campaign from Dish Network. They are targeting someone who's likely to call. They don't even include a web form on their landing page. They've got right in the middle a strong call to action asking somebody to call them. Now, the Esurance example next to it is a form, but they also have the option up top of somebody to call their agent and engage in a conversation. So if you're not sure if the person would prefer to call or to fill out a form, it's very easy to include a small call to action at the top of your forms, asking somebody to call you and giving them that option to easily connect if you're not sure what their preference is. Now, you can see if somebody clicks off of your landing pages into your site in general, a couple of general things that you can do to make it easy for them to call. You can see what Salesforce does is they have a floating bar that follows you as a footer with the call us now call to action. Home Depot, one example, most websites do this now where you can include a phone icon or a clickable phone number at the top in your header just to make it easy, regardless of where somebody is on your website, to engage with you by calling. So next slide. Now, there are also strategies you can use in order to specifically target somebody with display ads who you think might be likely to call. So, earlier on, Stephanie gave a bunch of examples of different ways you can target somebody with display, but you can also use call data. So, in order to show the right ad to the right person at the right time and give them the right experience to generate that phone call. So here's an example that I like to use because this is one that worked on me. So you can retarget past callers, people who have called you in the past, regardless of what channel they used to call you, with specific display advertising, getting them to come back and give you a call. So here's an example from Sandals. When I was researching honeymoon destinations, I ran the search you see on the left for Grenada, adult-only resort. I saw Sandals. I gave them a call, and I talked to their person. Now, I didn't actually go on and book my honeymoon because obviously I wanted to speak to my wife, and we wanted to look at a couple other options as well. But Sandals started retargeting me with display ads. And when I clicked on that, I was sent to a landing page where there was a strong call now call to action, which I ended up converting on and ultimately booking my honeymoon to the Grenada Resort in Sandals. So again, if you know somebody has called you in the past, you know they're likely to call you, show them an ad experience with display where you're optimizing for that phone call. If you go to the next slide, now this is an example of a customer of DialogTech, Comfort Keepers. And what they're doing, and what many of our customers do now, if you're interested in phone calls, you can actually use call data as a lookalike to build lookalike audiences of people that are likely to call and become customers. So if you know the characteristics of someone who has called you in the past and become a customer, you can use that characteristics to build lookalike audiences in display. You can also do it in Facebook or in search, and you can actually show ads to somebody who's never engaged with you in the past, but they match the characteristics of people who have called you and converted. So here, Comfort Keepers does this using data they use from DialogTech. They show, as you can see, an example with a strong call to action of talk to a Comfort Keeper today. It shows, the expectation of a phone call. And they've shown that this strategy of this lookalike audience using call data as the model is able to generate 4 times the callers of their next best targeting audience. So it's been very effective. So if you're a business that wants calls, this is a great way to expand your reach of your display ads to find new audiences likely to call. So next slide, please. But as Stephanie mentioned with exclusions, you can also use call data for exclusions. So if you don't want to show your display ad to somebody, you can also, because they've called you in the past, you can use callers data to build exclusions. So you're not wasting ad impressions. So for example, if you know somebody has called you in the past from your careers page, they're not a sales prospect or somebody who's calling your company to get a job, you don't want to show them your ads. Why waste money? So don't do it. You can exclude those people from seeing your ads. Or perhaps if you're not looking to generate calls from current customers with your display ad campaign, because you think perhaps, let's say you are a technology company, the person's already a customer. If they're going to be calling you, they'll be calling you for support, not to become a customer again, obviously. You can exclude them from seeing your display ads. Or if they've already called you, and you have an ad campaign that's geared towards generating first-time callers or new offers to new people, but they've already called you, exclude them from seeing your ad. So again, you can use call data as a way to really get to fine-tune your exclusions to make sure you're only showing the right ads to the right people. So
Blair,
next slide.
Jump in real quick. This is also a great opportunity to exclude keywords like jobs, careers, things that you don't really want to show up when people are out there. Like maybe you're looking for something specific, but you definitely don't want people who are looking for a job or how to submit their resume.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, with all the options you have today for audience targeting, it really is. It will really benefit you to take advantage of those and really drill down and make sure you're showing the right ad to the right person so they have the right experience. So if we can move on to the next slide. So we talked about why calls are important. We talked about some of the optimization tactics you can use. It's also very important, and Stephanie touched on some of the call tracking aspects earlier, But it is important for you to get data around how your display ads and your marketing overall is generating phone calls, just like you do now for web conversions. So you can take the same smart, data-driven approach to what's working and eliminating what's not. So if you go to the next slide, DialogTech provides this data to our customers. But here's some of the three main buckets that I like to sort of explain what kind of data you can capture specifically around phone calls. So the first bucket would be, what drove the call, understanding the marketing channel that drove it, if it came from display or Facebook or SEO or paid search, whatever it is, offline marketing, direct mail, email, what channel drove that call. Then if it was an ad, what was a specific display ad or paid search ad that drove that call? If it came from paid search, the search keywords. And then if the person visited your site first, what was the website interaction? What page did they go to? Where did they click through? What page did they call from? All of that data is really important for you to understand what marketing is working to drive in calls. And you can use that in order to improve your bidding and your optimizations to make sure you're targeting your media spend is being spent in the right way. Now, the second bucket would be caller profile data. So also understanding you're generating these calls, understanding who the caller is, where they're calling from, where in the country that call is being generated. Are they a first time or a repeat caller? And then things like the time of day and the day of week. So you understand all of a sudden that this display ad is generating this many calls from this geography during this time of day. Is it first time or repeat callers? You really get a sense for what types of calls you're generating. And then you can use that caller data, the geographic data, the time of day data to do some really interesting targeting optimizations to make sure that you're getting the biggest bang for your media spend. And then lastly, the quality of the lead. So it's not just driving calls. That should be the goal of your marketing, but to drive quality sales calls. So being able to know if the call you're generating is in fact a quality sales lead. Did they convert, whether that is to an opportunity or an appointment or to become a customer or to revenue, depending on what your business is? Did they convert? And what was the ultimate value of that call? And being able to take all of that data and being able to say, okay, now I know all of this, I can better optimize for what's working while eliminating the strategies that aren't. So if you go to the next slide, this one I think is really important for display. So as Stephanie mentioned earlier, oftentimes with display, somebody might see your display ad, but they might not convert right away. So they might be just browsing ESPN.com or CNN.com or whatever it is, and they see your ad, and you're getting that impression, but someone's not going to convert right away. But you're building up your brand awareness, and they might need to see your ad 1 or 2 times, as you can see in this example. Then they ended up running a branded search for you. So there are studies that show that people who are exposed to display ads are more likely not only to run a branded search for that company, but also convert once they do. So when this example happens, if they end up converting by a phone call, it's important for you to get all this data together in order to understand, okay, it wasn't just the search, the paid search ad did drive the conversion, the phone call, but these other display ads influence that. And if you only looked at steps 3, 4, and 5, you might think that your display ads, which you're spending a lot of money on, aren't working for you. But in fact, they were critical in influencing the paid search conversion. So this is really cross-channel attribution that enables you to really make sure that you're not pulling the plug on important brand building and brand awareness digital display ads that would end up impacting the effectiveness of your paid search advertising and other ads that are generating those last touch conversions. So if you go to the next slide. So, once you've got all this data for your calls, it's important that then you can share that data with all the other marketing and ad platforms you're using, not just for display, but for paid search and all your other online advertising. So I proposed a couple examples here. But if you pass that call data into AdWords, Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, whatever you're using, you can then see at a glance not just the online activity and online analytics, but also the call analytics alongside. So you have more of a holistic view of the impact of your display ads or to be honest, any of your digital advertising. You can also pass the call data into optimization platforms, platforms you're using, whether it is to improve your display advertising, do the targeting, or if it's paid search or social media, whatever advertising you're doing, whatever tools you're using to optimize, you can pass the call data in so they have that intelligence as well, so they can optimize not just for what's driving online conversions, but what's driving the phone call and really make the more smarter optimization decisions. Or if you're using a tool like Optimizely, for example, for A/B testing to optimize website conversions and performance, make sure you include the phone call data so it can use that to determine which versions of a web page or a landing page are driving the most overall omni-channel conversions. And then ultimately a CRM system, if you have one, being able to pass your call data with all that attribution information into your CRM system like Salesforce or Microsoft or Sugar or whatever it is you're using in order to follow those calls from the source that generated it through the sales process to revenue. So you can really start understanding, okay, I know not only that this ad spend generated this many leads, calls, or online conversions, but also this much revenue. So I can really start understanding what's bringing home the best value. So if you go to the next slide. So that's really the point of data-driven optimization, is understanding in an omni-channel world that people convert in different ways, online or by calling or by visiting your store, being able to get attribution around that, having it all together, getting a holistic view of the customer, knowing what's generating not just conversions but customers, and optimizing your advertising and making sure you're putting the best ad in the best place and spending your money wisely to really get true ROI data. If you go to the next slide. So there are two more strategies I want to touch on that are a little more advanced. So I know there's some of you who are already doing some of this call attribution data analytics with your display ads, but I wanted to touch on at least some of the more advanced strategies you can use to analyze and personalize the caller experience. So if you go to the next slide. So some of the questions you might want to answer. So you're spending money to generate phone calls into a call center or into one of your many locations, or to an agent, or wherever it is you're sending calls. As a marketer, you need to know some of the answers to these questions. Like, A, was the call even answered? Are you spending money sending calls to a location that's not answering the call? How long did the call last? Usually a longer call is more indicative of a quality call. Was it even a sales lead, or was there a call for something else? What were they calling about if you're selling multiple products? Understanding that this caller was calling about a certain product. How did the sales agent perform? So you're in your call center or at one of your various business locations or dealerships, is the sales agent saying the right things, or are they veering off brand and failing to mention promotions or ask callers the right things to convert them? Words the callers use, what the words the callers say might be important to you, understanding if they're using certain terms or speaking certain words. And ultimately, did the caller convert? So those are some of the questions you might want to have access to. If you're in an agency or you're sending calls away from a call center, maybe you don't have answers to these questions. So I want to show you two strategies you can use in order to get them. If you go to the next slide. So one strategy is using a tool called conversation analytics. So this is, you can log in. This is an example of ours, but there are, if you can log in on your computer and just say, okay, I want to look at, show me every call I generated to a certain location or to a certain agent from a certain marketing source, or that took place during this day or this time, or where certain words were spoken. So show me every call I sent to my Chicago office from this display ad in the past 30 days where the word appointment was said. You can actually do that. You can generate a list of all those calls and drill into the recordings and transcriptions to get bigger insight. So, if all you have are call recordings and you're sending thousands of calls a week out from your marketing, you can't listen to every recording. But this conversation analytics functionality is a way to really generate a list of just those calls that match the criteria you're looking for to do a deep dive. So if you go to the next slide, you can see a quick example. this one, you can see, okay, I ran my search criteria. Here is every call that matches the criteria that I wanted to see. And I can see at a glance, the phone label, what generated the call, the source, when the call came in, how long it lasted, was it a quality lead or not a lead, and I can then say, okay, let's drill into each one. And if you go to the next slide, let me pick up one of these calls, drill into it, and I can see highlighted a transcription of the words I wanted to see. I wanted to see if the word demo was used in this example. I can also listen to the call if I wanted to and see where in the call the words I wanted to look at took place. And this is really an easy way for you to filter into and get deep insights into some of the quality of the calls and the call experience that you're generating from your marketing. So then you can know if the agent said the right words. Did the agent ask for an appointment, for example, or mention a promotion? Or what did the caller say? Did the caller use certain keywords that you might want to bid on, for example, that are different than what you're bidding on now? Or are there questions a caller asked that maybe you think, oh, maybe I can optimize my landing pages or my website to answer those questions and improve my SEO. So again, you can get all that data now, and that's something that many marketers don't even think they can have access to, but it's quite easy with conversation analytics. Next slide, please. The second technology is artificial intelligence. I'll just touch on this really quick, but you can also use AI in order to dive into phone call data that we talked about and get these answers for you. So one customer of ours, Comfort Keepers, does this. They send about 3,000 calls a week to around 450 franchise locations, and they're only a small 3-man team. So they don't have the ability to listen to recordings and actually say, was this a call from a potential customer or a current customer, or was it not a sales call? They have AI automatically go into the data, analyze each call that they're sending, and show, okay, not only now am I telling my franchisee that I sent them 50 calls this week, but I can also say I sent 50 calls from new customers, 20 calls from current customers, and then 5 calls that were not potential sales leads. So you can have AI do some of this analytics for you. Next slide. So lastly, a couple tips around improving the caller experience before we go to the Q&A. Again, if you have any questions, you can please input them in the chat box and we'll answer as many as we can. The last tip I wanted to say is, as marketers, you might not think that there are things you can do to improve the actual caller experience in real time, but there are. And it's important because as marketers, if you're spending money to generate a call, it's not just the conversion you want that revenue. You want that customer to convert. You want them to become an opportunity, depending on your business. And there are things that you can do to improve the caller experience in order to make it more likely that somebody will convert and become a customer. So if you go to the next slide, I like to show this slide because as marketers, it's important to understand that a really negative call experience will hurt your marketing ROI. So you can see some stats on the left. 84% of callers say they would stop doing business with the company after a single negative caller experience. And there's a stat that shows that over half of people who intended to make a purchase backed out because of a poor customer service that they're getting. And this includes phone calls. So what are the main pain points and complaints people have that lead to a bad caller experience? Well, the first one is missed calls. Are they calling your auto shop, for example, and the person's not answering the call? Lengthy wait times. Are you keeping them on hold for too long? Are you sending callers to people who can't help them, so you're having to pass the caller from agent to agent as they wait for some kind of help? Or are the agents who are answering the calls, they don't know anything about why the person's calling. They have to re-explain over and over again what their call is. All of these lend to a bad caller experience. And as marketers, there are things you can do to help alleviate each of these pain points. So next slide. One thing you can do is route somebody right away to the right agent who can help that person. So we talked about all the data that we collected about the phone call. You can use that data to route somebody in real time to the best person or location to help them. So for example, if you know somebody is calling from a certain landing page about a certain product, you can route that person directly to the agent or group of agents who are likely who handle that product. Or if you know they're calling from downtown Chicago, you can route them to the closest store or dealership in Chicago to help them, or to the agent if you're in a call center who handles Chicago, who handles Illinois. You can also route people based on the agent skill set. So for example, if you know that some agents are more likely to close deals than others, and let's face it, some salespeople are just better at it, you can route your calls, more calls to the people more likely to close them if you want to. Or you can route calls differently based on time of day if you have offices that are open in different time zones, for example. So again, you can do this automatically with the goal to get this person right away to the best person to handle their particular call based on what you know about them at the time. Next slide. You can also prioritize callers. So if you're putting people into call queues when they're calling, for example, if you have a call center, you can actually prioritize people from different marketing sources that have proven themselves to convert better. So whether it's a display ad campaign or a certain keyword search or whatever it is, if you think that that is indicative of a higher converting caller, you can put them into VIP call queues so they'll be answered first and give them priority over people who might be calling from other sources. So if you understand what's driving the best conversions, you can make sure that those people who are calling from those sources are answered first in order to make sure they don't hang up or get frustrated or go somewhere else. And next slide. So there's also ways you can pass information on the caller to the salesperson before they answer that call. So here's one quick example. You can see somebody who ran a search for cheap car insurance, ended up making a call into the business. Then when that caller is going into the call center, a pop-up can happen, in this case within Salesforce, but it doesn't have to be in that case, where you can actually see, okay, I have an incoming call. Here is who the person is. Here's where they called from. In this case, the keyword search, cheap car insurance. So I know before I answer, this person is calling about car insurance. They're concerned about price. They're calling from Chicago. All of these things are ways that I can have a great conversation right off the bat because I know why the person's calling. Next slide. So a lot of information there. We're going to do a little QA in a second, but first I wanted to say if you're interested in any of the techniques I talked about around the phone call, give DialogTech a call or shoot us an email. If you're on this webinar, we'll happily offer you a free call assessment where we will look at how you are attributing and driving calls at the caller experience in your business and provide tips and strategies that we think could work in order to generate better callers from your marketing and convert more of those callers to sales. If you go to the next slide, I'll hand it back to Stephanie in order to explain a little bit about their offer as well.
Sure. We have a solution blueprint. It's a free custom account analysis for companies and brands that spend $15,000 or more per month. One of Hanapin's experts looks at your account and compares the structure and results to industry standards. I would highly suggest to in-house PPC teams double check your work with a fresh set of eyes. That's what the blueprint is.
Great. So I'm sure we've got several questions here. I know that we're running a little short on time, but I know that we can probably get to a couple while people fill out their poll. So, Stephanie, do you guys want to go ahead and fire some off?
Sure. So one of the questions is they have been exposed to tools where they can find cookie personas they fall under. Can they explain how both men and women fall under 4 different distinct income groups? This doesn't provide me with a warm and fuzzy about accuracy of these persona segments. With personas, and when you're building the persona, I think some of it is trial and error. Some of it is trying to put the right combinations together and just continue testing to determine what combination works best. So, with AdWords, the buckets are putting into, some of it's a bit subjective, some of it's not. So I would just continue testing different targeting groups, like I said, to determine what works. Also continue testing different bids as well.
Yeah, I nothing to add. That's perfect.
So one of the questions was about the slides comparing search and display. Can we share the product the client was selling? I can't tell you exactly what they're selling, but their product prices range between $2,000 and $30,000. And it's a longer term purchase. So what we had found was this client had 60 to 70% phone calls, and that's where I mentioned with only dynamic website call tracking, we were able to see very lengthy phone calls, but had no additional insight into the data other than we knew the calls seemed like they were quality. But being able to listen to the calls and actually determine what sort of price ranges the customers were talking about helped us better determine that there was a lot more revenue online, especially being driven by non-brand. And we, like I said, in the display campaigns, getting phone calls from people who are interested in purchasing the products as well. Kind of more in the construction industry is probably the best way I can answer that. So some of the thoughts about VCPM bidding using active view measurements for display. I did use CPM, but not VCPM, and it was a little bit different trying to tweak the bids. I didn't have as much success with it and wound up going back to CPC, so that was my experience with display. What about you, Blair? You know anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's similar to the sort of results that we're getting. I know for us, you know, CPM isn't, it's not the best bidding strategy for ours. I know for, you know, for DialogTech specifically, and the people I talk to, you know, having really be able to fine tune is the way to go.
All right. So another people are wanting to post the click to calls. So I did kind of discuss that a little bit earlier, where you can't really use, you can use click to calls with search. You can add your call extensions to search with display select, which will show mostly on high-end mobile devices. So, but as far as tracking display, you would want to implement third-party call tracking and use tags in your URL to swap the phone number with a one-on-one on the website. Blair, do you have any thoughts around that?
Well, I do. Of course, since we're DialogTech is a third-party call tracking solution. Yes. So thank you for the plug. Yeah, we can. It works. If you're not familiar with it, it works. It'll dynamically generate a phone number on your landing page based on the source of the person who visited it, and that number will follow them throughout your website. So if they call, even if they call later from a different page, or they come back, you know, it'll have all of that data together, that multi-touch attribution data if they end up calling, so you can get attribution not just for what generated the call, but also the display ad and the influence that generates it as well. So obviously, I'm happy to talk to anyone offline if they're interested in a free, you know, getting started with call tracking. No problem.
One of the other questions was, what is one of the best ways to optimize display campaigns? One of the best ways that I found is, like I said, using the exclusions, the keyword exclusions, going through your placement reports to determine where you're showing up. If there's places in there, like perhaps you're showing up on UK websites and you only sell in the United States, or you're showing up on what looks like a lot of kid websites, which maybe kids playing on their parents' phone, but all those things that you can kind of use to optimize and reduce your spend in places where you're not getting any conversions.
Yeah, and it depends on what your business is and what your goals of display are. Are you looking to drive conversions or build brand awareness? You know, I like retargeting, and I like to not just use retargeting as a strategy, but then, you know, layer in some of the additional targeting you can use to make sure you're showing the right ad to that person. So making sure that you're showing, if somebody comes, visits you and is interested in a certain product or service, making sure that you're showing the right ad based on where they are in the customer journey and what they're interested in. And also, you know, if they're someone who prefers a phone call, making sure that you're making it easy for them from your landing page to call you, and really incentivizing that. I know a lot of times I see, you know, customers of ours will want to use data. If someone's called and not converted to a customer, they might want to show specific offers that they only show to those people in display ads, that they don't want to show to a larger audience. So being able to control that, I think, it can be very effective. But again, it all depends on what your what your customer journey is like and what what it is you're selling.
I fully agree. Another thing to consider with your display and remarketing is make sure you keep those in separate campaigns. Your remarketing message would be very different than your display message. Your display message could be people that you're reaching out that have not been aware of your brand and you're introducing yourself, whereas remarketing, you've already had some touch points with this client. You'll want to give them a more customized message based on what your ad says.
Yeah, people who've gotten burned by display in the past, it's probably because if your message was too general and your targeting was too general and you didn't have the right attribution to see that the views were influencing conversions later on from that person. I can understand that, but there is a reason why display ad spending is one of the fastest growing media spends right now. It's because it does a great job, if you use it correctly, of generating those conversions.
Yep. And as we mentioned earlier, you'll really want to watch your other channels. If you spend a significant amount of money in display in a month, monitor your organic and your direct traffic and your brand traffic to determine if you saw a significant uptick in the performance of those channels.
Yep.
All right. Well, if we didn't get to your question, feel free to contact us directly. And really thank you for attending our webinar. And with any follow-ups or any after feedback, you can use the hashtag ThinkPPC on Twitter. Again, have a great day. Thanks for joining.